I remember standing there, the music still throbbing in my ears, the scent of cheap champagne and expensive perfume hanging heavy in the air. I was 19, home for the summer from college, and this annual holiday party, the one my parents always hosted, was supposed to be a nice, slightly boring evening. But then I saw it. My dad, the man who I thought was the cornerstone of our perfect little family, backed into the dimly lit hallway just off the kitchen, his arm around a woman. And it wasn't my mother, it was Sarah, Mom's very best friend, the woman who was practically my aunt. She had her head tilted back, a wine glass hanging loosely in one hand, and then he leaned in, his mouth finding hers in a kiss that was anything but casual. It was long, it was deep, and it was undeniably passionate. My breath hitched in my throat, a cold, sickening stone dropping into my stomach. I was about to rush forward, to scream, to make a scene that would destroy everything, when a hand clamped down firmly on my arm. I whipped around and saw my mother, her eyes wide, but not with panic or shock. They were blazing with a strange, almost manic excitement. She gripped my arm tighter and pulled me back, further into the shadows of the coat closet entrance, her voice a low, terrifying whisper that cut right through the party noise. She said, "SHH, honey, SHH, don't ruin it. The best part's coming." I know. It sounds completely insane. What kind of mother says that when she catches her husband cheating? What kind of person says that? I've been wrestling with the sheer absurdity and horror of that moment for months. It changed everything I thought I knew about my family, about my parents' marriage, and about what betrayal really means. Was I wrong for just standing there and letting the whole thing play out, paralyzed by my mother's words? Or was my mother the wrong one for dragging me into her terrifying, calculated secret? Tell me, honestly, if you would have done the same thing, because I still don't have the answer. To truly understand that moment, you have to know what our life was like before that party. We were, by all outward appearances, the perfect family. My father, Robert, was a successful architect, steady, dependable, with a dry wit and a slightly receding hairline that made him look distinguished. My mother, Clara, was a vibrant artistic soul who ran a local pottery studio. They had a meet-cute story they loved to tell, involving a spilled coffee and a shared love for classic rock. 25 years of marriage, one college-aged kid me, and a comfortable life in a beautiful old Victorian house. They were the couple all our friends and relatives envied. Then there was Sarah. Sarah and Mom had been inseparable since high school. Sarah's husband, Mark, was a sweet, slightly dopey guy who worked in finance. Their daughter, Chloe, was my age, and we grew up side by side, sharing treehouses and secrets. The four of them, my parents and Sarah and Mark, had a standing Friday night dinner date. They vacationed together. They were so intertwined that Sarah and Mark's house keys were on my parents' spare ring. It was a beautiful, stable web of friendship. Or so I thought. I had always been close to my parents, especially my dad. He was the one who taught me to change a tire and appreciate good whiskey. He was my hero, my rock. That's why seeing him with Sarah, the woman who was supposed to be family, felt like watching the earth crack open. The whole day of the party had been a blur of last-minute preparations. Mom and I were rushing around, setting up the bar, arranging the hors d'oeuvres. Dad was working late, which was typical for him before a big event. I remember Mom being quieter than usual, a little too focused, her movements sharp and deliberate. Now, looking back, that was my first clue, the first subtle tremor before the earthquake. I dismissed it at the time, thinking she was just stressed about hosting. Around 7 p.m., the guests started arriving. The house filled up quickly, neighbors, colleagues, and of course, Sarah and Mark. Mark was loud and boisterous, immediately making a beeline for the bar. Sarah, however, seemed off. She kept shooting quick, nervous glances around the room, and when she hugged my mother, it was a stiff, awkward embrace that lacked their usual warmth. I saw Mom give her a look that was too long and too intense for a casual friend. I thought maybe they'd had a fight. A silly, minor squabble over something trivial. That thought comforted me. I got distracted talking to Chloe, catching up on college life. It was about 45 minutes later that I wandered toward the kitchen to refill my water glass. That's when I saw the couple retreating into the hallway. The hallway where the back exit was. The hallway that led to the garage. The hallway that was strategically shadowed, almost hidden from the main party area. I squinted, recognizing Dad's suit jacket first, then his profile. My heart started to beat a frantic, uneven rhythm in my chest. Then the tilt of the head, the familiar shock of red hair. It was Sarah, and then the kiss. The world narrowed down to that single, horrible image. I felt the heat rise in my face, the sudden, overwhelming urge to vomit. My dad, with Sarah, in our house. During a party he co-hosted with my mother. The betrayal was a physical blow, and then the cold, firm hand of my mother. She didn't just pull me back. She practically dragged me, her fingers digging painfully into my bicep. She positioned us in the deepest shadow cast by the heavy oak coat rack, a perfect vantage point to watch the scene unfold, completely unseen ourselves. I was hyperventilating, trying to pull away to shout a question, but she clamped her free hand over my mouth, her eyes wide, wild, and utterly terrifying in their stillness. "Quiet," I said. "They're not done." She hissed into my ear, her voice devoid of any emotion other than a strange, chilling anticipation. My mind couldn't process it. Why was she watching ? Why wasn't she crying, screaming? Why was she protecting the two people who were destroying her life? I tried to whisper, "Mom, what are you doing there?" But she cut me off, her eyes never leaving the hallway. "I know what they are. I'm just letting them get comfortable. Watch the faces, honey. That's the important part. See how smug he looks. See how she looks like a naughty schoolgirl." She wasn't asking me. She was talking to herself. A monologue of quiet, focused rage. Over the next few minutes, which felt like an eternity, Dad and Sarah continued their whispered conversation, punctuated by quick, furtive kisses. I saw Dad pat her hand, a dismissive gesture, before he straightened his jacket and headed back toward the living room, presumably to play the role of the charming host again. Sarah watched him go, a triumphant, almost predatory smile on her face before she, too, composed herself and rejoined the party, heading toward her oblivious husband, Mark. I finally wrenched free from my mother's grip, my voice shaking. "Mom, what the hell was that? You saw them. Why didn't you say anything? Are you okay? We have to." She finally turned to me, her expression hardening into something I had never seen before. It was cold, calculated, and utterly ruthless. "We have to do nothing, yet. Do you think I'm stupid? Do you think I just stumbled upon this tonight? No, my love, I've known for 6 weeks." The revelation hit me harder than the sight of the kiss itself. She knew she had been living with this secret, watching them, planning something. She led me up to her bedroom, away from the noise, and poured herself a glass of water, her hands perfectly steady. She then began to lay out the story, not as a victim, but as a general planning a military campaign. She told me she had found suspicious texts 6 weeks ago, then had hired a private investigator who confirmed the affair and had been feeding her information, photos, times, locations. She hadn't confronted Dad because she knew that would lead to a messy, quick divorce where she'd get half, and he'd still look like the regretful man who made a mistake. That wasn't enough for her. "I deserve more, and I'm going to take more," she said, her voice dropping to a low purr. "Robert has a secret account, an investment fund I didn't know about. It's substantial, and I need to get access to that. I also need Sarah to be thoroughly and completely ruined, not just a footnote in our divorce papers." She explained that the party was a deliberate part of her plan. She had orchestrated the timing, the placement, even the low lighting in the hallway, knowing they would slip away for a moment of perceived safety. She wanted to no asterisk when they would do it next, and she was watching them carefully, building a case for something much bigger than a divorce. She told me she was planting tiny seeds of doubt, subtle, almost undetectable actions designed to make Dad sweat and Sarah panic. A slightly sarcastic comment at dinner, a knowing look, nothing they could put their finger on, but enough to rattle their carefully constructed bubble of lies. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling like I was watching a stranger. This wasn't the warm, artistic mother I knew. This was a mastermind. She looked at me then, her expression softening only slightly. I needed you to see it, honey. I needed you to know I'm not crazy. I needed you to be on my side. I was appalled, terrified, but also morbidly fascinated. Her pain was translating into a horrifyingly brilliant strategy. The next 2 weeks were a strange, tense play. Every family dinner, every interaction with Sarah and Mark felt like walking on a pane of thin ice. Mom was a master of passive aggression and psychological warfare. She would bring up a random location, say, the name of a city Dad and Sarah had visited on one of their trysts, in a completely innocent context, and watch the color drain from their faces. She'd compliment Sarah's dress, saying, "Oh, it's so bold of you to wear that color," emphasizing the word bold with a poisonous sweetness. Dad started drinking more. Sarah was jumpier, constantly checking her phone, shooting Mom looks that were a mix of fear and hatred. I was caught in the middle, a silent, unwilling accomplice. Every time I saw Dad, my chest would tighten with a mix of love and disgust. Every time Sarah hugged me, I felt a shudder of revulsion. I couldn't tell Mark. He was too gentle, and Mom had forbidden me to speak. Her final, most crucial move was still being prepared. She was waiting for the perfect, irrefutable moment. So that's the situation I was in. My father, the man I idolized, was having a long-term, calculated affair with my mother's best friend. My mother, the woman I loved, had transformed into a cold, vengeful chess master, knowingly allowing her husband and best friend to continue their deceit, while she quietly built a devastating case against them. I was 19, caught between two monsters of my own making, forced to watch my family implode in slow motion. I had access to the evidence, I knew everything. I could have gone to Mark, stopped the whole thing, saved everyone a lot of prolonged misery. I could have confronted my father and demanded he confess, but my mother's words, "the best part's coming," had lodged themselves in my brain like shrapnel. I wanted the truth, the whole truth, and I wanted justice for my mother's betrayal, even if her methods were terrifying. Before I tell you what happened next, what Mom's best part was, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have intervened, or would you have stayed silent, waiting for the dramatic, terrifying climax? The climax, as my mother called it, finally came 3 weeks after the party, during their annual joint family dinner. It wasn't Friday, it was a Tuesday. Mom insisted on hosting, saying she had a big announcement. The atmosphere was almost unbearable. Dad was sweating visibly, trying too hard to be charming. Sarah was picking at her food, shooting furtive glances at my mother. Mark was blissfully unaware, chattering about a golf game. Mom served the roast, poured the wine, and then, after we'd all taken a bite, she tapped her glass with a knife. "I have something wonderful to share," she announced, her voice bright and melodic. She looked directly at my father and Sarah, who both seemed to freeze mid-chew. She said she was launching a new line of high-end ceramics, and she needed an investor. She named a figure, $600,000. Then she smiled sweetly, "And I know just where I can get it." Dad cleared his throat nervously. "That's wonderful, Clara, but that's a big number. Who do you have in mind?" Mom's eyes glittered. "Oh, Robert, you, of course." She then proceeded to talk, not about pottery, but about the specific, offshore, undeclared investment account he had secretly opened years ago. She detailed the exact routing numbers, the date of the first deposit, and the current balance. I watched Dad's face go from pale to ash gray. Sarah let out a small, strangled gasp. Mark, bless his soul, was still confused. Wait, Bob, you have a secret account, why? Dad tried to sputter a denial, but Mom cut him off with the precision of a surgeon. Don't bother, darling, I have all the proof. The private investigator's report is on your nightstand, and Mark, you might want to take a look at the appendix. It has a delightful photo collage of Robert and Sarah in the Bahamas. A trip they told us was a business conference. The silence that followed was so thick it was suffocating. Mark slowly looked at Sarah, then at my dad, then back at Sarah. He didn't rage. He didn't shout. His face simply crumpled. He looked like a little boy who had just had his favorite toy broken. Sarah finally found her voice, a desperate, hysterical shriek. Clara, you witch, how could you do this? Mom merely sipped her wine, completely composed. I'm securing my financial future, Sarah. That's what a good wife does. And you, dear Sarah, you are going to lose your husband, your best friend, and your social standing. Robert, you can sign over the entire account to me as part of a quiet, amicable divorce. Or I can hand all this over to the IRS and your company's ethics board. Your choice, your career, or your money. Dad, defeated, nodded miserably. The look he gave me, a look of profound shame and loss, was the only thing that managed to pierce through Mom's armor of strategy. It hurt, but the hurt was mingled with a fierce, cold validation. The evening ended with Mark silently walking out the door, Sarah screaming after him, and Dad slumping in his chair, a broken man. I never saw Sarah again after that night. Mark filed for divorce the next morning and moved back to his hometown. My parents' divorce was quiet, clean, and financially devastating for my father, but my mother was set for life. The aftermath was painful, but ultimately liberating. My dad moved out and started over in an apartment across town. I maintained a fragile relationship with him, one built on the understanding that he had made a terrible mistake. But I couldn't forget my mother's calculated brilliance, even though it scared me. She got her revenge, her money, and her freedom. She sold the Victorian house, moved into a chic loft, and launched her ceramics line with the capital she extracted. She was happier, sharper, and more successful than she had ever been. But there was a hardness in her eyes now, a permanent chip of ice. I learned that betrayal cuts deep, but revenge, when executed with cold precision, can be a terrifyingly effective weapon. My mother's horrifying whisper, SHH, the best part's coming, became the defining sentence of that summer. It taught me that sometimes the person you think is the victim is actually the puppet master. Her story wasn't one of a passive, heartbroken wife, but of a woman who was smart enough to monetize her husband's infidelity and use her best friend's moral failing as the ultimate leverage. I'm still processing it all, the ethical gray area I was pulled into, the absolute destruction I witnessed. I don't know if what my mother did was right, but I know it was effective. I also know that I'll never look at a holiday party, a hallway, or a best friend the same way again. The whole mess has left me with a deep, unsettling understanding of the dark complexities that can exist beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect life. Like this video if you were on my side for waiting to see what my mom would do, or if you think I should have stepped in earlier. Subscribe for more stories like this one, because believe me, there are plenty more secrets lurking in those Reddit threads. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. Tell me who the real villain of this story was. I'll see you all in the next story.